because they're hospitality guys. And you professional
Thank you, Your
criticizers criticize them. I say this in answer to that. These guys are happy. They're gay. They're for freedom. They like to go around and have their friendly fun. So what? As long as they don't bother anybody doing it, nothing wrong with it. There's no
Mr. Mayor.
violence. You can tell that by the caliber of these guys, by the neighborhood. Go to Clark and Diversity, you don't see any garbage laying on the streets like you do in a garbage-filled, refuse-filled city in New York. What about that? Nobody says nothing. And God willing, it'll continue to be that way. These people are the kind of guys you walk down the street and you know that they're nice. And the most important thing is this. And listen to this closely, Mr. Evers. These are the kind of guys that when the national anthem plays, they put their hand on their heart. And if you take enough time to stop criticizing them once in a while, they'd put their hand on your heart. Frank? You have a question?
Your Honor, Chicago's always been famous for its colorful characters. Looking back through the years, are there any particular colorful characters that you're especially fond of?
Well, Mr. Evers is a very colorful character, of course, right here now. And, of course, you had, in the old days, the guy with the chicken that used to ride around. And remember him? And, of course, there was all the guys in Bughouse Square. I used to like to go down there once in a while and hear him. And there's Alderman Dupre.
Your Honor, what do you think is the answer to the ethnic neighborhoods retaining their cultural characteristics and individuality in this ever-changing and complex city?
Well, we have... The answer is really quite obvious.
Mm-hmm. And what is that, Your Honor?
Sandwiches.
Sandwiches?
Sandwiches is the answer.
I don't...
It's a meaningful way to express oneself.
I see. Would you... I don't understand exactly.
Did you ever go to Ashkenaz, the fine Israeli-American restaurant on the north side of Chicago on Morris Avenue there? You ever go over there? Or the Bats, that fine restaurant on the south side of Chicago, that wonderful restaurant on Cermak Road? You ever go over there?
You're correct. They do have sandwiches there, Your Honor.
Well, that's right.
That's
right. What do they do there?
You eat sandwiches and...
Well, they not only eat sandwiches. The important thing is this. That the Israeli-American people who were at the bottom of society, they were the scum of the earth. And what have they done? They've moved themselves up to the top of society. And how have they done it? They named sandwiches after their great people. That's what they do. They take sandwiches. They take something that means something in their community. This is what holds a neighborhood together. The answer is sandwiches, Frank. You go into Ashkenaz, and what do you see there? You don't see a corned beef sandwiches. You see a Cup-Sinnet sandwich, an Irv Cup-Sinnet sandwich. You see a Marty Face sandwich, Musholek's friend. You see a Phil Lynn sandwich.
In other words, they name their sandwiches after their people, and you feel that would solve.
That's right. You have a Shecky Green sandwich.
What about that? Kind of ridiculous, Your Honor.
That's not ridiculous. Of course it's not ridiculous. That's unreasonable reasoning on your part to call it ridiculous.
No, but people are interested in, progress, education, better housing, so forth. Every neighborhood has sandwiches, Your Honor.
To be perfectly frank with you, Frank, let me say this. When one of these fine Israeli Americans or even a non-Israeli American takes a bite into the sandwich, it makes his chest swell up with pride every time he eats one of them. Because every neighborhood could do that. The city of Chicago would be a better place to live. What about other areas? Other areas. Instead of, on the west side of Chicago, instead of having just a tuna fish sandwich, they could have the big tuna. What about that? Everyone knows who he is.
I see. I still feel, education, there are more important things.
No, there aren't more important things. There aren't more important things. What about in the area, the Lincoln Belmont area, the fine German American area? What about that? What about that? Instead of having a sauerkraut sandwich, they could have a submarine sandwich. What about that? That's a great sandwich. In the Old Town area, they could have the Mile High sandwich. What about that? That would be great. And you could have lots of good sandwiches like that. Mile High sandwich for that area. Or you could have a sandwich for the guys that don't want to go to the war. You could have the chicken sandwich. What about that? That would be a good one. You could even have a sandwich, Frank. You could even have a sandwich for the guys on the 12th and State area, the police department, the Chicago's finest police. You could have the club sandwich for them.
Club sandwich.
That's right. And you could have combinations. You could have combination sandwich. If they got together with the guys that didn't want to go into the war, the guys from the Old Town area or that, you could have the chicken club sandwich, Frank. What about that? That would be a great one. And they could be led by the controversial Reuben sandwich. What about that?
Voting.
Nobody says anything about it. You could have
areas for children.
Everybody
Lighting.
should have this, Frank. Everybody should have it.
Start
Tongue
nuts.
sandwich for the French. What about
Sandwiches.
that? What about the Greeks? Instead of complaining about that there's not enough meat on the sandwich in the Greek neighborhoods, you could have an Aristotle Onassis sandwich.
Aristotle Onassis sandwich, Your Honor?
That's right. Lots of bread.
I'm getting a little groggy. Could we?
You could have the bologna sandwich for the Republicans.
Can-
What about that? The red
I'm all
herring
mixed
sandwich
up,
for the
Frank.
Russians. What about that?
Your Honor, can we take a break? I'm a little dizzy.
Well, why don't you come over into my neighborhood for a sandwich, Frank?
What kind of sandwich is that, Your Honor?
A hero sandwich. Mr. Tinker, you raise your hand for a question?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Were Judge Julius Hoffman's sentences, in your estimation, really fair?
Some were fair, some were good, and most of them were excellent. I graded his paper, the punctuation was good, there were no ink blotches or fingerprints on it, and I gave him a gold star. Next question, Mr. Ebler.
This could be construed as a very personal question. I think it's...
We don't mind personal questions, Mr. Ebler. We enjoyed them. It's nice to lighten the tension with something a little bit light once in a while.
Thank you, Your Honor. What I wanted to ask you, and what I will continue to ask you, is that we of the press and many of the free people in the country have noticed.
Everyone's free in this country, Mr. Ebler. We're just as a free country. That's one of the great things about this city and about this country is that it is a free country. Not some of the people, but all of the people, such as yourself, Mr. Ebler. Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You want to go on with the question, please?
Your Honor, my question actually is whether you use as a psychological tactic never remembering or never even acknowledging any of your opponents at any time, anywhere.
Next question.
Your Honor, if you were a visitor coming to Chicago, what would be some of the things that you would not want to fail to miss in this city?
City Hall, of course, one of the great sights of Chicago. Lake Michigan, a great lake. It's a lake that's not in New York or in
Yes,
Detroit
it
or
is.
anywhere else.
It is
It's
a
here.
great lake.
It's here
One of the
in the great
5.
city of Chicago. The Magnificent Mile. What about that? There's a reason that it's called the Magnificent Mile, Frank. As you know, I'm sure you've strolled down on it many times after announcing one of those fine baseball games of yours.
I think we're
And
all quite
you,
proud of
you
you.
stroll down there, and what do you see? You look on the left, and you see the Daily News, and you look on the far right, and you see the Tribune. And there ain't nothing wrong with that. That's nice. Well, what about the planetarium, Frank? What about that? And do we plan it out, Frank? We plan out the aquarium. That's why we call it the planetarium. Then we've got it there on the lake for the convenience of the fine fishes. We don't have it out at Toohey and Western or someplace like that. We got it there so the fishes will be happy, and that's important. What about the dogs walking through the parks? Those nice dogs. We don't have them on the streets downtown doing their thing. We got them out in the parks where they belong, and they're pretty and they're nice. The Picasso. What about that? What about the great Picasso? A lot of people have. A lot of people, that's right. A lot of people had a lot of things to say about the Picasso. But the Picasso was given to us, and it's a proud thing that we have here in the great city of Chicago, not in Goshen, Indiana. I like to go on South State Street. I like to go to the Pacific Garden Mission down there. Nice place. A lot of nice people down there. I like to go to Tats Thomas. What about that? One of the fine art men in the city. They talk about the Art Institute, the greatest art institute. What about Tats Thomas? He should be mentioned right along with the Art Institute
Tattoo
as
parlor,
being
isn't it?
a fine thing. Excuse me, Frank?
Tattoo parlor?
That's right. The fine Chicago tattoo parlor, probably the finest in the country. And we got a lot of things like that. The museums. We don't charge you to push the buttons there. We got all kinds of buttons in the museum. You go in there, push the buttons, don't cost you nothing. What about that? And what about the band shell? What about Grand Park? And we got the band shell there. And we don't just have all the great classic musicians there. We got for the young people, the great young people of this city. We're not against them. We're not against them. We have their guys there. Harrison Airplane, he was there. The Steel Caterpillar, a lot of the other rock and roll groups that come in here, we let them go in there as long as they stay. That's right. As long as they stay in Grant Park where they belong. That's all right. We don't do nothing about it. And we got a lot of action in Chicago. A lot of action. We had to take down Riverview, but now we replaced Riverview with the Kennedy L. What about that?
Very exciting.
You don't know what's going to happen on there.